There's a bit of a delay on Zoom that is going through. Let's just give it a second.
I'm finding it very hard to hear you clearly, Peter.
I'm not talking, that's Cry.
Oh, sorry. I heard someone talking. I thought it was.
But I couldn't hear Cry either.
You can't hear the rain outside, can you?
No, sadly.
Jesus, storm blowing here.
That sounds nice.
If you hadn't to work in it, it's fine.
Sorry?
If you hadn't to go out and work in it, it's fine. It's nice to look at.
Yeah. I'm in Berlin and we never get real weather.
Berlin's great. Haven't been there in a while.
Yeah, it is nice. Will they tell us that it's broadcasting, or will there just be a little broadcasting sign?
Yeah, they'll
Something on the top left-hand corner saying recording. Do you see that?
It will say streaming live to Facebook, and I'll also put in the chat box live.
Okay,
but,
great.
Yeah, there seems to be some kind of a delay. I'm just going to message our tech group and see what's happening.
Cool. Technology.
Where are you from, Peter?
I'm from South Africa.
Okay, you live in Berlin?
Yeah, I live in Berlin. Okay, we're going live, it seems.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Machin, and I am talking to Gary Keane, the co-director of the documentary Gaza. Welcome, Gary. How are you doing?
Hi, Peter. How are you? Nice to talk to you.
Likewise. I just watched the film again. I watched the film during the selection process, and I watched it again this evening. And it really is a remarkable documentary. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to make the film?
It's a long story, Peter, but I'll try my best to shorten it for you. I'd always had an interest in the region, like always from as long as I can remember. I've had an interest in Gaza. Just I don't know what it was. I think maybe in Ireland we have we feel an affinity towards Gaza. We share kind of histories in one respect. So I always had a thought in my head as to how to make a film there, but any time I ever inquired as to the logistics of that, I just kind of got put off. Making feature documentaries is hard enough, and making them in Gaza seemed like a big hill to climb for an Irishman. So I was researching another documentary on conflict photographers back in 2012. And one of the photographers' names that came into my possession was a guy called Andrew McConnell. And I cold called him. I got a number from him, cold called him, and we started talking about that documentary. But very soon into the conversation, Gaza was mentioned, and he told me he had been in there since 2010 doing a photographic project called the Gaza Surf Club. And he sent me a link to it. It hadn't even been published quite. It was published, but just hadn't been on his website. So I took a look at it and absolutely loved it, and loved the access he had, and loved the kind of angle he took, and loved his composition. So I dropped all conversations about the original project I'd rang him about, and we started talking about Gaza. And we decided that we'd have a go at joining combining our skill sets, him being a photographer to shoot it, and me having 20 years experience making documentaries, and we try and make something happen. So that was the origins of it in 2012. We didn't shoot anything until 2014. Andrew was there during the conflict at that time. We got a bit of money from the Irish Film Board and went back in 2015. And then it took us until 2018 to raise the rest of the money to go back in and finish it again. So it's been living with us for a long, long time, Gaza. So it's nice to be talking about it being made now instead of making of.
Yeah. So how do you make a film in a kind of a besieged region, in a blockaded area?
With extraordinary difficulty, to be honest with you. But before I even talk about the difficulty, the logistical difficulty about making it, actually physically making it, the biggest problem we faced was the funding of it. And we didn't anticipate such problems with the funding of it, really, because the footage we had from 2014 during that horrible 50-day conflict, we had over 120 hours of that Andrew shot. And the footage we went back and shot in 2015, we had another 100-ish hours. So we had an awful lot of material filmed by then. And we thought that the materials we were putting out as promos and trailers in order to get interest from funders and from funding bodies. You know, the reaction from people were great to what we were doing, but there came a point in the funding process where all correspondence would just stop on us, and we didn't really know why. It was a real puzzling thing to us to begin with, because the producers that came on board, Fine Point Films and Brendan Byrne, you know, had a great track record in raising money, and they felt very confident they'd raise the money for this quickly. We thought we'd actually wrap this film up in 2016, 17 at the latest. But an awful lot of doors were closed on us when Gaza went to the top table for the final decision. And we just started getting the feeling that there was an awful lot of people who didn't want this film made and who didn't want to fund it, and who actually wanted to do everything they could not to get it made, really. So that was our biggest difficulty. But thankfully, Brendan finally raised the money through co-producers in Germany and co-producers in Canada. And the actual logistics of filming there were very, very difficult. The Egypt side, Rafah side, was closed at the time. We couldn't get access, so we had to go through Israel and go through the formalities of going through the press office and explaining our situation in part, and getting access through there. So that was very, very, very difficult. And it was only myself and Andrew to begin with. It wasn't until 2018 that we actually got to bring a slightly bigger crew in, you know.
Okay.
But yeah, filming on the ground was easy-ish in 2015. It was extraordinarily difficult in 2018. Things that got a whole lot worse. Sensitivities were at an all-time high. Hamas were really suspicious of us. We were put under house arrest the first day we got there for 3 days, and we were locked in our apartment with armed guards at our door. Through serious negotiations, we ended up convincing them to allow us to film. We had a constant escort then behind us watching everything we did for another week until they got kind of bored with us. And we were left to our own devices. But yeah, I mean, I could go into great detail about it, but yeah, it wasn't an easy film in any respects. Extraordinarily difficult film to make.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, there must be many cases, you know, many situations where you were concerned for your own safety and survival.
Yes and no, to be honest with you. I think the difficulty in turning around a film and getting it made kind of superseded everything. And by the time we actually got there, we were so happy to be there, and so happy to have our equipment, and so happy to have the time to do it. We kind of everything else went out the window, really. Do you know what I mean? You spend so much time dreaming of doing something, and then finally getting to do it, and the amount of effort that went into actually getting our feet on the ground in Gaza felt a whole lot worse than anything that we expected when we got there. I know that sounds a bit strange, but you know, when we just took it as what it was. The situation is what it is there. You know, we were as careful as we could possibly be at all times, although it's very hard to be careful all of the time, especially, you know, Andrew, especially as a cameraman, would be putting himself out there in the firing line at the protests and at the border and that. So, you know, it was very, very, very hard, especially on him, to be fair. But you know, Andrew has 20 odd years experience, 15 years experience as a conflict documentary photographer anyway. So I think in a very, very peculiar way that wouldn't be appreciated by anyone else who's never done it. But the camera becomes nearly a shield between the photographer and what's going on literally 6 inches beyond the lens, you know. And it becomes that sort of a peculiar sort of a comfort blanket, even though it has no safety value whatsoever if something happened. But yeah, I mean, there was tear gas being shot, there was bullets flying by, there was turmoil and mayhem at the border at all times. And as I said, Andrew was putting himself on the front line filming that. But for the most part, we were not at the front line. You know, we in the heart of Gaza, talking to people in the city and people in the countryside. And to be fair, we never really felt particularly threatened in those places. You know.
Yeah. Good. When you first envisaged the film, or when you first started talking with Andrew about it, did you have any kind of vision of the kind of film that you'd like to make?
Exactly the vision, to be honest with you, because the very first promo we made, the very first kind of teaser we made to try and get funding back in 2015, could be a trailer for the film now. Because we had a very, very clear idea of what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it you know, as apolitical as you can make a film in Gaza. We wanted it to focus on people. We always wanted a huge cast because we felt if we were going to try to portray a place and a people, that we needed, you know, as many different types of people in there, young, old, male, female, different classes, different kind of occupations, different perspectives. So we always railed against the footage that was coming out of Gaza and how horribly political it was and how horrible it looked physically. And we always wanted to make something that looked quite beautiful, because even though we got some awful stick, especially in America, about how it looked, you know, there was a tendency for people to criticize it looking cinematic, because obviously you can't make a documentary that looks well and is real at the same time. I mean,
yeah,
I don't obviously subscribe to that notion, but you know, we fought back and said, no, why don't the people of Gaza deserve to be filmed in a nice way? Why doesn't the place deserve to be shown for its potential? Because it's a Mediterranean coastline. Like, I mean, under any other circumstances, you know, it would be a beautiful paradise of a place, and has been in its distant past. So we always had, you know, those core ideas agreed upon, and we stuck with them, and we never really changed or had any reason to change our path in the course of making it, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I am very interested in the idea of the aesthetics of the film. Was it something that you felt you had to kind of balance carefully, or did you just follow your gut and intuition in terms of determining which parts of the film should kind of feel more cinematic?
Well, I think the sea was always going to be a huge part, and the landscape was always going to be a huge part, but the sea in particular for the film, because I heard from Andrew anecdotally, and I found out for myself when I went in, that, you know, the sea is the life breath of the people of Gaza. You know, they're hemmed in on every border, and the sea is the only place, the seaside and the sea is the only place where you can go and look out and see a horizon line. And some of the time, not very often, there isn't a gunship patrolling it to stop people in. It's a kind of an invisible border of sorts. And for the people of Gaza, they can somehow, psychologically, they can somehow kind of forget themselves when they're looking that direction. And at the time in 2015, the sea was quite clean because the sewage treatment plants were still operating, surprisingly, after the war to some degree. So people were bathing, families would go down, the place was packed, all the animals would be there, all the kids would be there, they were praying there, they were socializing there was food there. It was literally where everybody in the strip went. And then that all came to a sorry end by 2018, because the sewage treatment plants had all but stopped, and there was raw sewage going into the sea, and people stopped going in, and that became, so, you know, we wanted to show the coastline, we wanted to show the sea, we wanted to show the place for what it was and what the potential of it could be. And we just felt instinctively that we wanted to film everything and show everything and portray everything as well as we possibly could, and show people in as good a light as we possibly could, because they're dignified people, and they have as much right to be filmed in a correct manner as anybody else in any other documentary I would ever make. They're people, you know, and why should you know, they not be shown in their best light, you know? Yeah.
In terms of that, and this comes from specifically one shot in a taxi that was just so nicely framed, with the guy in the back sitting perfectly in the middle. I just want to ask you if you and Andrew ever art direct specific shots. You know, obviously you're not going to do it with trauma. You're not going to do it with trauma or hospital scenes or anything.
No, there was no art direction whatsoever done. We never altered any environment that we went into. Those taxi shots in particular, I mean, we just rigged the car with GoPros and let them go. We didn't know most of the time who was getting in or out. We didn't put any sort of narrative on it. We cast the taxi driver, who was one of the first people we wanted, and we always wanted a taxi driver. From the very early days, we had cast types in mind, and we went looking for them, and we spent ages and ages and ages looking for a taxi driver, because we felt that a taxi driver would not only give us access to traveling up and down the strip in order to show it, but his taxi would also become a kind of a stage of sorts for other people to have their conversations apart from us entirely as a crew. So funnily enough, by the time we got to Gaza, we hadn't found the taxi driver that we thought could do the job. And the guy who's in it, Ahmed, was our driver for the shoot. He was hired by the fixer to drive us around.
Okay.
And after a day, myself and Andrew went back to our flat and went, why do we need to look any further than the driver? He's brilliant. He's an amazing character. So warm and so engaging. So we went back the next day, and to his horror and surprise, initially we asked him, would he be in the film, and would he tell us his own story, and would he share his own personal details with us? And he agreed, reluctantly at first, but he got it into the idea after a while. So then we just decided, we asked him, could we rig his car and let him go and see what happened? So no, we didn't position anyone or art direct anyone or do anything in that regard. You know.
Did you ever find, as a documentary maker generally, and in this one specifically, you talk about the camera, creating a stage. Do you ever struggle with people being too performative?
Yeah, I mean, you always have to deal with that in documentary. I mean, the minute you introduce a camera into the scene, you obviously change the dynamics. But I think that's what separates good filmmakers from bad filmmakers and good films from bad films, is the ability to put people at ease and try and get them to forget about the camera and try and convince them in as real a way as possible that the camera is only there to record the reality of the situation. It's not there to create anything. It's there to just be a device, a recording device to let them express what they want to express and show you what they need to show you and tell you what they need to tell you. And I think, it comes from experience. I started doing this back in 1992. I think I made my first film, and, so when you do it, and I made lots of bad ones, believe me, in the early days, so you learn by your mistakes, and you learn to put people at ease, and you learn the right way to deal with people in situations and put them into a position where they do forget after a while. You mightn't use the first 10 minutes of what you film.
Yeah, sure.
But slowly but surely, they relax and they get used to you. And Andrew is very good at that as well. As a documentary photographer, you're kind of a ghostly soul. You're kind of a quiet figure. You meander and maneuver about places and situations and try and be as invisible as possible. So Andrew would be a very kind of an invisible cameraman in that regard. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think between us, we set out our stall with people. We were very honest with everyone. We told them exactly what we were there to do and why we were there to do it. We gained their trust very, very quickly, and they're beautiful people to work with and film with when they get used to the idea. The biggest problem we had with all the people who took part in it was to convince them that their stories would be important enough to show to the world. They're very humble people, and they thought, well, who would want to listen to my story? And we go, well, we think everyone would want to listen to your story, because your story hasn't been really told, as far as we're concerned, in this way. You haven't been allowed to just talk about your ordinary lives and talk about the impact of your ordinary lives and talk about your own problems at home and your own sufferings in that way, without it being housed in a little soundbitey news item that's fired out, and everyone gets completely desensitized towards what you're saying because they're just used to hearing the same thing over and over again. So all of those things came into play, I think, when it came to people just acting normally around us. So hopefully that it comes across like that, because the people that you see in the film are very real, and their stories are very real, and they're very honest with us. So we hope we pay them back in that regard.
Yeah. Well, what is the longest that you followed any of the characters or any of the cast?
Well, there were some of the characters that were filmed in 2014, and we finished filming with them in the middle of 2018. So young Ahmed, the boy, and Karma, and the who else would have been there throughout that period? The paramedic, Ibrahim, and so an awful lot of them we would have had a relationship with them for between 4 and 5 years. The main characters.
Yeah. Did your view of Gaza change from when you first arrived there to by the time you finished filming?
Yeah, unfortunately, well, not change is probably the wrong word, but it certainly, I left far more fearful in 2018 for the people than I did in 2015. There was an element of hope. We were wondering after the conflict in 2014, when there were so many deaths and every single family was affected by some death in the family, and that the place was devastated physically. And we thought when we went in 2015 that we'd get a very depressed sort of a place and a very depressed sort of a people. But to our great surprise, you know, the resilience of the people shone by 2015, and they weren't dwelling on what had happened. They were busy building their lives and building their places and building their homes and putting back their families into some shape. And there was a real sense of hope around Gaza at the time that, you know, surely things couldn't get any worse. They could only get better, and that, you know, various conversations that were happening outside of them and in the political realm and within the international community might come and rescue them and save them from a horrible future. Unfortunately, it didn't, though. And by 2018, when we went in, we found a place that was far worse than we had left it in 2015. The infrastructure had all but gone. You know, sewage systems had gone. You were showering in rainwater coming through all the faucets and all the showers. You know, there was people living on the street because they were turfed out of their houses. Everybody seemed to be in debt because nobody could earn any money. Half of the strip were in prison on a temporary or full-time basis. The sea was polluted. You know, people's houses were just crumbling around them. The whole health system was struggling hugely, which it still is. And unfortunately, it's going from bad to worse. I mean, Jesus, nothing could be worse than hearing the other day that suddenly there was cases of COVID-19 in it for the first time in ages, after them being so stringent about trying to keep it out. And it's growing every day, and you just fear that they're in a fish tank. You know, they're not able to move, and if you have a virus like that on a population that cannot leave and cannot move, and there are 2 million people stuck together, you just are awful fearful at the moment for all our friends over there. But no, so unfortunately, I'd love to be able to give a sense of hope, but I don't see a lot of it at the moment, unfortunately, unless there's some major changes. But the politics in Israel and especially at the moment with the political situation in America, it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon, you know.
Yeah. Related to that, there's a question, an anonymous question from the audience. It says the film is coming for some criticism that it ends by surrendering to what is basically propaganda. How would you respond to that?
I don't think there's any, you know, how do you go in? You can't go into a place like Gaza and make a completely non-political film. I mean, you have to put down your marker and stick. We were always going to make this from Gaza. We were never going to go beyond Gaza to make this. We were never going to look in. We were always going to look out. We wanted to turn the cameras back into Gaza and see it from what it is from the inside out. And I don't even know if I want to answer that question in terms of propaganda. I don't think there's anything remotely, you know, propagandish about what we did. So I don't know.
I don't think so either. But I suspect that what makes some people say that is simply the cinematic nature of the final scene.
Possibly, yeah. But I mean, that's a longer, different discussion about film language, you know. But
yeah, no, sure.
It has nothing. I don't think it has anything got to do with politics. It's got to do with perception, you know what I mean? And you put out a film like Gaza, and, you know, not to get people who would question it and to get people who are anti it. I mean, that's fine, and that's obvious. It's going to happen, you know. I mean, when we premiered in Sundance, we had our visitations at every screening who decided to come and shout abuse at us. But one thing that was very clear and very consistent about the objections to us is they would never face us. They would never talk to us. They shouted and left, shouted and left, shouted and left. And, you know, we were even accused of being anti-Semitic, which is, you know, ridiculous in the extreme, because, you know, we had so many beautiful Jewish people coming up to us after the screenings in America and all over America, and especially in Harvard, where we had a screening to 200 or 300, I'd say it was 99% Jewish, and the conversations were fantastic. You know, we're discussing the you know, politics of a country. We're not discussing a people. We're discussing politics and the way the political system and how political attitudes can murder and strangle a whole race of people. You know, so look at
Sorry.
Yeah, you know, whatever. But, you know, it's ridiculous to think that were any of those things. I think we went in as two neutral observers to try and give the people of Gaza a voice and a platform to express their very simple personal views. And if people think that that's bias or whatever, then that's so be it, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, those kind of comments, you know, in relation to your film in particular, do strike me as, you know, somebody who's just, you know, gone straight to the comment section and hasn't read the article.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, we'd be naive to think that there aren't people out there who want to throw mud at it, but that's fine. You know, there's, you know, out of all of the comments, we staged at over 100 film festivals last year. We had multiple online platforms. I mean, you're going into the over 200-300, all very, very highly attended. And I'd say it's 99% positive reaction we've gotten. And the most important positive reaction we've gotten, to be honest, from our point of view, was from the people of Gaza themselves, that we represented them properly. I don't know if you're aware, but after the conflict in 2014, they tried to have a little mini film festival to give themselves a little boost, and they called it the Red Carpet Festival. Tiny little thing just to give people something to look forward to, outdoor film festival. But by 2019, when we released the film, there was no funding left for it and they couldn't do it. So the crew of our film got together and we started an online campaign to try and raise money, and we raised 25,000 through the generosity of lots and lots of people out there through a funded site. And we restaged the Red Carpet Film Festival for the first time in a few years. And the opening night, it was an outdoor screening of the documentary, and over 1,300 people turned out from the strip and watched it en masse, and it was 100% positive reaction. They had a fantastic night, and I was getting emails and texts for a month afterwards, you know. So that's the important thing, you know, that we represented the people properly, and that you know, two Irish lads can go in and tell their story, and they're happy about that, you know, because that's always a worry. I mean, there's a thought that, you know, you can't make a documentary about Gaza unless you're from Gaza. I don't subscribe to that. It's a hot topic at the moment, you know, even from funding institutions and from film festivals. They tend to favor documentaries made by internal filmmakers rather than external ones. But I think if your heart's in the right place and your sensibilities in the right place, and you know what you're doing and you have the backing of the people to do it, I think it's nearly a benefit sometimes to have that outside perspective and not be lumbered with the baggage of being from a place in order to tell the story of that place, you know. So it's an interesting discussion that's raging at the moment about filmmaking, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of South Africa, you know, there have been many documentaries made about South Africa, but some of the most incisive have actually been made by, you know, well, some of the most incisive and also some of the least incisive have been made by people from other countries. And it certainly seems to me that sometimes that distance does give a kind of, you know, a beneficial perspective. It
can. Now, whether you make a good job of it or not is another thing, but it certainly can if you approach it the right way and you're good enough at what you do, I hope, you know. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that, you know, that you could do in Gaza, and you know, this is a very common question for photojournalists and war photographers and war journalists, is that you could leave. How does that feel, you know, being able to leave and having left?
Heartbreaking. Like, I mean, I you know, as any man of my age would, you know, I've had my own, you know, family bereavements and sufferings and, you know, problems down the years, and all of those came with great sadness. But I don't think I've ever been as sad as standing on the border that day we left in 2018 and saying goodbye to our friends. It was heartbreaking because we knew that was the end of our filming and possibly maybe the end of our visits ever to Gaza, really. And we certainly didn't think that any of them would ever get out to visit us, whether they got out or not, but certainly to come all the way to Ireland is a stretch, and none of them have been able to do so. So it was extraordinarily difficult for us to leave, really, really difficult. And it was very emotional, and it's even, you know, I could tear up even talking about it now, because it's so it's so fresh and real, you know.
Yeah,
Horrible.
but are you getting to be?
I lost you there. Sorry, the audio.
You getting? Yeah, and I said you're getting to me too. I was.
No, you know, it's terrible. I mean, it's so unnatural to confine an entire people and blockade them in and not let them leave and not let them their normal freedoms that we all take for granted. You know, I mean, you know, the smallest of things, like, I mean, the fixer who we got, who was an extraordinary man called Fadi Hanouna, who worked with us since 2015 and organized everything on the ground and was our local production manager. He's a man in his early 30s now. And, you know, when we talked about the cinema and reinvigorating the red carpet, he said, I've never been in a cinema. I've never sat in a cinema. I've never been on a train. I've never been on an airplane. I've never left Gaza. I've never left this small little place, you know. And you kind of go, in 2019 or 20, like, why is that allowed to happen? Like,
yeah.
How can that be allowed to happen in this day and age? How can a country decide to close off an entire population of 2 million people? And how are they allowed to do that? I mean, it's a simple question.
Yeah.
Why is there not worldwide uproar about that situation? I don't know what's happening really when the international community at the very least don't make a real issue of Gaza and allow that people to be free and to allow their freedoms, you know, because they've had it in the past and there was no issues. It's politics, it's bad politics that's creating this situation. Do you know? And bad politics can be righted if there's a will to do so. There just is no will to help the people of Gaza, and that's just such a sad state of affairs, you know.
Yeah. And it's bad global politics, you know, it's not just in the region.
And be under no illusions, like the people of Gaza are disillusioned with their own internal politics as much as anybody else's. But, you know, between their own internal politics, between the external politics that's around them in terms of the Israeli foreign policy and the policy in regard to Gaza, and in relation to the international community, the people of Gaza feel completely let down by everyone within that system, you know, and rightfully so. I mean, if any person out there listening to this has a problem with what I'm saying, just picture yourself in a place the size of Gaza with 2 million people and you're not allowed to leave. You're not allowed to see your friends and family in the West Bank. You're not allowed to go on holidays. You're not allowed to cross the border and do anything and come home again. I mean, there's this perception that if you open up the borders of Gaza, everyone would leave. That's so wrong. They all have their friends and family and houses and, you know, lives in Gaza, but you'd want the freedom to be able to go and visit your cousins in Ramallah and come home again and be normal, you know. So I don't know, it's despairing, really.
Yeah, we have some we have a few questions from viewers. From Sholofelo Kwakwa, says Gaza is such an amazing, engaging film. How can the narratives explored in the film be used to improve the situation in Gaza and other areas experiencing the same injustice?
Yeah, I mean, look, we kept ourselves going through the whole process thinking that us as filmmakers, that's all we can do. We're not politicians, you know, we're filmmakers, that our film would make a small difference and change people's minds. And it has done to as much as a film can, you know what I mean? I mean, it was warmly taken on board by the United Nations, who are using it in their own ways to promote understanding and use it in their world. We've been to all the universities in America to try and, you know, tell young people and schools to tell, you know, young people what's happening and how their own governments are implicit in the problem. And, you know, we've had numerous correspondence with people all over the world who have said that they're going to, you know, stop thinking about doing something to help Gaza in their own way and actually going to do it, whether it's, you know, try and set up some sort of aid organization or try and do something to promote an understanding or a better appreciation of what's happening in the place. You know, one of the best, I think it's young people really are the key to it all. One of the best screenings we had 5 screenings in Sundance when we premiered there, but they asked us would we voluntarily agree to get involved in a schools program that they run. And it turned out to be the first screening in Gaza. Oh, sorry, of Gaza in Sundance. And we didn't know what to expect. All we knew was that there was a screening for schools. It was a schools program. And would we come along, myself and Andrew, and do a Q&A afterwards for the schools? So we slipped into the cinema about 10 minutes before the end of the film, and were shocked to see the size of the arena. There was 460 seats, and every one of them full with 14 to 16-year-olds. And all of them glued to the end of the film. You could hear a pin drop in the cinema. And we were going, oh my God, we just hadn't put it at that scale, you know? So the teacher brought us on the stage afterwards and introduced us and said, are there any questions? And literally 450 hands went up in the air. And it was extraordinary. And the Q&A was set for 20 minutes. And after about an hour, 50 minutes, 55 minutes, the teacher had to call a stop to the Q&A because they needed the cinema for the next film. But we could have stayed there for 3 days answering questions. And it was just so uplifting to see American kids and their interest in the film and asking us about what America had to do with the situation there and what they could do as American citizens to change the situation there, and asking about the children there and asking about the schooling there. So I think if we were to do anything with a film like this, it's to try and get as many young people to see it as possible, and to try and start an awareness about what's happening in Gaza at a young age, so that hopefully the next generation might have more power or might have more sway in terms of rectifying things than the current one has, you know.
Yeah, but I hope so. And not just for Gaza.
Yeah, of course, for Jesus, there's so many troubled areas in the world. It's frightening to think about them.
Yeah. Morgan Morris, one of the viewers, asked a similar question, which I won't read, but I just want to acknowledge that he asked a similar question. But then he also asked this question, how do your subjects respond when they see outsiders coming in with their cameras? I wonder if that for them isn't a common sight. How do you win their trust?
It was so easy to, they're such a beautiful people and so friendly. And I've never been in a place that's so friendly in all my life. Like, I mean, the biggest problem in trying to get a day's work done in Gaza was trying to work around the amount of offers of food and tea and juice and conversation, because at every turn we were invited into every house. We were fed until we couldn't move. We could barely work with the hospitality that was being afforded to us. And they looked upon us, I don't know how they look upon people generally with cameras, but they certainly looked upon us once we explained why we were there, once we explained the type of film we wanted to make, once we explained the context. Being Irish actually helped, because they know there's great solidarity in Ireland for the Palestinian cause and for Gaza cause in particular. I mean, one of the biggest groups in our parliamentary party structure here amongst politicians is the Palestinian group in our political circles. So I think, you know, and we're constantly sending aid and we're constantly doing what we can in terms of that end of things. So I think that helped enormously, and we absolutely found it so easy to work in Gaza. You know, it was so lovely. If you said to me now, where could you go if you had the opportunity anywhere in the world, I'd pick Gaza without a second's hesitation. You know, I'd be there if I could.
Cool. And I'm pretty sure that, like, what you're describing is almost the complete opposite to what you know, the average, you know, middle American thinks of, you know, someone in Gaza.
Well, yeah, unfortunately. You know, they're a very warm, beautiful, proud people who just want to be left make their country what they could make it and do the best for their family and, you know, have a normal life. Yeah.
We kind of need to start wind down the session, but I just want to ask you, I want to ask you a very honest question, and this kind of comes from the tone of things. When you make a film like this, you know, obviously you're doing it for, you know, reasons that are true to your heart. Does the loss, the loss that is evident in the film and the experience of making the film, does that linger with you in a way that you find difficult?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's not a day goes past but I'm communicating with somebody in Gaza. So it's not as if we made a film and left and went on to the next film and forgot about the last one, which, to be honest, does happen with more trivial sort of subject matters, because you have to keep working and you have to keep moving. And if I kept in touch with every one of the people that I filmed with over the last 20 years, I'd have little time to film any new documentaries. But Gaza is absolutely an exception to that rule. I mean, we have a family there now. We have friends there. We have people there that are very, very close to our hearts and very close to our daily routines. And, you know, since I sat down with you maybe half an hour ago, I think I have my phone on silent, but I think there's about 6 texts in there from Gaza. You know, if I'm not getting texts, I'm on the phone, you know, trying to do what we can to help, or trying to offer advice or counseling, or just a friendly ear to express their issues with. And so with all of us, I don't think we certainly haven't ever done anything prior to this that had as much impact, both emotionally, physically, and in a personal way. And I don't think we ever will again.
Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, you know, this is not an analogy, but it does seem that there's some kind of redemption there, just in the kind of humanity that you're expressing now, and the humanity that you clearly experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what words to put on it, really. I mean, we went there with the express intention of giving a platform to the people of Gaza to let them be themselves and express themselves, and we just wanted to be facilitators for that, and you know, be the people who brought our awareness of film language to the table, and narrative to the table, and our ability to make something that could be seen in cinemas and seen online and seen on televisions all over the world. And we did that, and we did it with all the best intentions, and we did it, you know, from our hearts, and we did it in a way that we thought was the correct way to do it. And look, I don't know if we got it 100% right, or some people might say we got it 100% wrong, but all of the best intentions were there. And as I said, the best answer we could get to what kind of a job we did was to the reaction we have gotten and still get from Gaza. I think everyone in Gaza has seen the film at this stage, and we have had not one person to come back to us and say, you've misrepresented us. And that's pretty much good enough for us, you know.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. Gary, thank you so much for talking to me, and thanks for allowing the screen to film at the festival.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much for accepting it. And the more people see it, it's music to our ears. So that's the important thing. When you make a film, it's no point in making it and putting it in a drawer. It needs to be seen, and we're very thankful for you guys for putting it on. So thanks a million.
Yeah. So to everybody who's watching this, tell everybody you know to watch this amazing film.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, Gary.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye.